Welcome everybody to my favorite video every year. We're just going to talk about formats, and that is something I love to do. Some quick notes before we break down the entire format for the whole RLCS 2024. In years past, I have consulted more so on the formats. This year is kind of radio silent. So when we found out what the format was, when you guys found out is when I found out. So let's break it down of what's good, what's bad, what's ugly, and let's go. So let's get back into our rule book here. Format summary. We're just going to kind of read this out, and then I'll go over my thoughts. RLCS will consist of 3 events: RLCS Major 1, Major 2, and the Rocket League World Championship. A couple notes here. Right off the bat, I hate this new naming philosophy of like, we're just going to call it Major 1, Major 2, and then we're going to call them qualifiers and not regionals. Like, that's a small fix, and maybe they still are working on that. I'm not really sure, but it just feels so plain. It's like, here's Major 1, here's Major 2. Like, I hope they have names soon for this stuff. It just, like, I don't necessarily need names for every single regional like we used to do like 2 years ago, where it was like, it's, you know, the mountain regional or whatever. That I thought maybe went a little bit too far, but just regional 1, 2, and 3 of this split, whatever name of that split is. One thing that we've flirted with in the past is you name the split based on where the major is, and that would have been kind of cool. Like, here's the Boston split or whatever. Maybe that could still be in the works. Who knows? Probably not. But that would be kind of cool too. But for now, just Major 1 and Major 2, it's like, I don't like the names of it. You gotta come up with something better. Like, even if it's like, here's the Hot Shot Major and here's the Grog Major, something, anything, please. All right, so, like, obviously we are down to a 2-split season, but it doesn't mean anything's expanded inside those splits. It's very similar. We're doing 3 regionals per split, or 3 qualifiers as they call them. So we're definitely losing a lot. I made a video about the prize breakdown of how much money is being lost for these players in a previous video. So go check that out if you want to hear about that. Really quick, let's just break down. I'm going to try and skip things where I can. One thing I want to talk about is the point system, if I can find it. Well, let's talk about the teams that are going to make it there, because that's obviously a hot topic of conversation. I made a video about this previously, way back, months ago, like probably almost like a year ago, about like, if the major is the same, do we change how many teams go, or who goes from what region? And like, I agree wholeheartedly with, if we're going to keep it at the same amount of teams, that this should be the split. This split is pretty solid. You need to get SSA to a major. It was kind of always weird that they were not at majors for 2 years. So you have to get them to a major. You have to include every single region at least once. OC and Sam, it's very hard to take away a team. The only one where there's a conversation around it would be OCE, because of how terrible they've been internationally. No offense to OC, but it's true. And then MENA absolutely needed 2 teams, right? Those were all set in stone. What that means is, well, we got to take away teams from somewhere. The only place you can really take away from is North America and Europe. So they're going down to 4 teams to include the 1 SSA and the 1 MENA team. There's arguments, I think, where OCE could have lost the spot, but that would really gut that region. For NA in Europe, like, I've always been on this, and I've talked about this in previous videos. I never liked that we expanded from 4 teams to 5 from NA in Europe. It was just not, like, needed, because, like, the whole point of the qualifier system or the regional system is you participate in your region to see who's the very best, to then participate at a major versus the world, right? To see who's the best in the world. An NA 5 seed or Europe 5 seed have had 3 tournaments to see if they're better than any of those other 4 teams, and clearly they are not. So why bring them to a major where technically, yes, I understand that they have a better chance to win the major than maybe an SSA or an APAC, but the benefit for SSA and APAC is the unknown, right? You just don't know what's going to come from them. While Europe and NA, those fifth seeds, you know that they are worse than 4 other teams from that same exact region. Now, obviously, that's not how placements necessarily work, and you will see some magical runs. We saw it from Moist in fall of last season, where they made it to the finals. But on average, EU and NA 5 seeds are the worst placement compared to the other 4 seeds, which makes perfect sense because they are worse than those 4 teams. They've had 3 tournaments to see if they are better. That has not happened. That has not worked for them. They don't look as good. They should lose a spot. So I'm not a big fan of when you go to international play of like expanding a region like crazy, like even when it is competitive or when it is the best region, because it just takes away more from the regional play than it does adding to the major necessarily. Because the regional play is like, well, I'm going to see these teams anyway. Like at the major, what's the point of watching? Like 3 teams already locked after regional 2, and it's like, it's not that big of a deal, right? So I don't mind that necessarily. I get it. Players are obviously going to be upset. Like if you're in that region, then yes, you should absolutely be upset that you lose a major spot. But if there is 16 teams, this is the way I would do it. I did propose an 18-team format in previous videos as well. I'll quickly recap of basically just you do a 4-team double elim tournament right before the major, or like, so it's at the major, but it's like the play-in basically. And you just take the 2 bottom teams from the last major and throw them in with the 2 teams that didn't make it, and you just do a double elim to get 2 teams back out, and then they go into the Swiss format, and you continue from there. That would at least get more teams there. They don't necessarily play the full length of series as everyone else, but they still get 2 series under their belt, like under LAN, and then you wouldn't have to lose the NA and Europe 5 seeds. So I think that would have been a great benefit to this format, but that is not the case. We're going for 16 teams, Swiss format into top 8 bracket, and that's the other thing that I want to talk about is we'll talk quickly. I'm not really going to look at the rules too hard to try and find it. Well, all right, it's right here anyway. We're doing Swiss best of 5s, even at the World Championship, into a top 8 bracket. That is the format for every single tournament going forward, and I absolutely love it. I liked in the first season that we were expanding with these formats and experimenting. I liked that we had different formats to just see what works. But my hope was always, all right, that the next year we found what works. Let's just use that format. There's really no need to change the formats. It's not going to make it more boring or anything like that. And also, when you keep changing formats, it's just going to confuse everyone, where you have to explain it over and over and over again. So it's very simple. Swiss into top 8. You could argue that you could go Swiss into the AFL style top 8 format where the top 4 are in the upper bracket, bottom 4 are in a lower bracket. You could argue that. Like, I'm like on the fence with that one. Like, it's not necessarily needed. I understand that it just makes where you land into the top 8 bracket very, very important in regions that are not NA in Europe. Like, it still matters in NA in Europe, but they get 4 teams in, so it's not as big of a deal. But for the other regions, it really matters where you land. But at the end of the day, you got to win your games, right? You have to win your games, and so you have to advance based on that. I'm never a huge fan of like, well, you know, it's going to come down to luck or whatever. And like, what if someone gets a bad bracket? I'm like, there's plenty of every other sport. You go to the Olympics, you get a bad bracket. Well, too bad, buddy. That's 4 years gone from your life. It's just the way it is, right? But you still get 3 qualifiers. You still have a chance to make an impact. But at the same time, I see like you want the best teams there, right? You want the variance to be not as high, but you still want some variance, right? Because you need excitement. So I could see the AFL style really helping with that to get a more accurate teams in there. But it is kind of awkward with the Swiss into AFL because you have the top 4 in the upper bracket. Well, the 5th seed also was 3-1. So that kind of makes things a little weird. Do you play a 4th, 5th tiebreaker? I love tiebreakers. I know everyone else hates them. But like, I probably would as a 5th round of Swiss. I wouldn't even care what the game differentials are outside of the 3rd seed. You just give them the top one, but then have 4 and 5 play a match. because it's so important of who goes in the upper and lower bracket. I know people hate that though, so it probably wouldn't work. So that's always tough of like, how do you do that? And then you're mostly just going to get rematches anyway of like the 2-0 round in Swiss. The 2-0 round in Swiss is going to have 1 versus 4. 1 wins, then 4 wins in the following round in the 2-1, and then they're right back into the top 4, and then you're probably playing a rematch in that first round of the playoffs anyway. So there's always that problem and stuff like that. So neither is perfect, but I do love that it's Swiss, because Swiss is fantastic to find who the best 8 teams are compared to the bottom 8. It doesn't do it perfectly into the bracket, but the bracket is just hype anyway. The bracket is just win or go home. You get the most hype matches, the ones people are going to tune in for, because every single match is going to be so incredibly important through the qualifiers and then through the majors and the World Championship. Obviously, it's all going to be really, really impactful. So I am a huge fan that the rules are exactly the same. A couple rules that I'm not a fan of are the qualifiers. Let's see if I can find this. One thing I want to talk about is seeding. I will hit on this briefly. I will do a video where we have the NA seeds and the European seeds at the very least. But I absolutely love how they're seeding. Absolutely love it. I never liked the idea of an eye test of like, what tournaments count, what don't count. We're going to have a committee seed them. I always want it to be formulaic, so people know exactly what they need to do. Now, obviously, it would be nice to have these rules ahead of time, but whatever. Like that's hard to do. But going forward, hopefully it's about the same. And you just know it's a formula. If you have these players, it's based on last year's performance. This is where you're seated. There's 2 reasons why I love this. One, it's not going to be incredibly accurate, but it's accurate enough, and it's better than an eye test where you have a committee and people are fighting over spots of like, well, this team should have been in, or this team should have been in, or whatever, or higher or lower. But number 2, it won't be exactly perfect, but it's going to give you a good enough placement. But number 2, the reason why I love Swiss is seeding really does not matter all that much in a Swiss format, once you advance at least into the main event. Because after round 1, seeds are then based on game differential and all that stuff. So teams are going to move around a lot in Swiss. Now, that is if they use the exact same format in terms of how you match up in Swiss. That could change. I don't think it's necessarily in this rule book. So that is a possibility of changing. But I would assume it would probably be the same as what we've done, where you go by, did you come from the upper or lower side of things? And then what is your game differential? You could also do Buckholz and all that stuff. And there's always going to be people in comments, Buckholz is so much better. I personally don't think so, but that's a separate video. Like, I'm not saying it's worse. I'm just saying it's like pretty equivalent. But either way, I love the seeding scores. I think it's fantastic. You need formulaic approaches. You need to get away from the eye test as much as possible. There's no need for eye test stuff. Just do everything through math. Love it. Absolutely love it. But let's get back to the qualifier portion. So qualifiers, every single team is playing in every single qualifier. Best of 3, I believe, into the top 48. And then it goes to best of 5. I do not like this rule at all. One, it makes for player burnout a little bit more for the top end of things, because those players that are at the top end of things now have to play in so many more Rocket League matches. Normally, if they were at the top end, they're still playing a lot of Rocket League matches, but more at the back end of a tournament instead of like at the beginning. So I don't think that is needed. I think the old system we had was fantastic. A top 8 in points, you're automatically into the event, except for the first regional. We do like a top 16. You could base that again, like off the seeding points. Have them play Swiss. Top 8 are automatically in. The other 8 go to a closed qualifier Swiss that are going to wait for the other 8 teams coming out of a double elim bracket. And then they do a Swiss. Those top 8 also go into the event. Swiss is always going to be so much better than a double elim bracket to determine a group of 16 teams, which 8 are better than the other 8. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. Obviously, in the 2-2 round, there's some luck involved and stuff like that. But for the most part, that is so much better than doing a double elim bracket. especially when a lot of these are best of 3, and especially because these players now have to play in so many more. There's going to be stories of team doing really well in a tournament, and then they lose in a random best of 3, and it's going to throw everything off. It's not even going to be the team that lost in the best of 3 that's necessarily going to be impacted. They're just going to impact a different team that didn't lose until like the very last round. Now they have to play them in like a lower bracket final to get in. It probably won't happen too much because it's like so many teams get in through this double Elam bracket, and those teams should be able to place well. But Rocket League is definitely a game of variance, where weird bounces can go your way. Like obviously the best teams are going to win 90% of those times or 95% of those times. But in Rocket League, I think there is a little bit more variance than maybe like a Fortnite style. And this is another kind of like Fortnite rule where everyone goes through open qualifiers. In Fortnite, generally speaking, those players are going to make it through every single time. But in Rocket League, that might not necessarily happen. And I think it would be much better for orgs and for planning if you had your top 8 into every single regional. You had your next 8 into that closed qualifier right before the regional and play them in Swiss with the double Elim bracket qualifiers. But for now, everything's double Elim. Top 16 will get in through that every single time. They also got rid of the invitational qualifier, which I don't mind. Like, I don't think we necessarily needed an invitational qualifier. I think that was more of a cost cutting. Like, we don't want to pay all these admins. My phone's ringing somewhere. Can't find it. Oh, here it is. But yeah, so there's that. Seeding for the first major. Again, seeding is not going to matter much because we're doing Swiss. But I think like NA actually got a pretty good benefit here. Because honestly, it should be probably top 4 or EU. I don't really see why they shouldn't be, but whatever. So you got EU 1 and 2. They'll play APAC 1 and SSA 1 in the first matchup in Swiss, unless things are changing where we're going to a more proper Swiss where it's 1 versus 9. I personally don't think that's going to happen, but it's possible. Then you got NA1, EU3, NA2, EU4, so on and so forth. Basically, OCE is going to play both NA teams. Sam is going to play both EU teams. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think at least... Oh, no, I'm sorry. Sam is playing both NA teams. My apologies if that's correct. No, never mind. I'm mistaken. OC2 will play NA1. Sam 2 will play EU3. So never mind. I take that back. I read that somewhere and then I thought it was gospel, but it's not. Again, seeding, not a huge deal in Swiss, so like I'm not too worried about it. Again, that's the beauty of Swiss. Like, it's more about just getting those teams there and allow them to move throughout that group seeding wise, like organically throughout the event. So I'm not too concerned with how the seeding is. I do think NA should not be this high though. NA1 should not be third. But yeah, so that's how that works. That's for both majors, and that's mostly like tiebreakers. One note, in terms of points, it's a little bit odd. For seeding purposes in RLCS Major 2, teams will be organized by the following parameters. Cumulative RLCS points earned from Major 1 in-person event. It is not based on anything in Split 2 at all. And this I do not agree with. Latest head-to-head record within this event, which I'm not sure what that actually means, honestly. But like that might mean within the whole season. I'm not really sure. And then if any remaining ties, you go back to the old seeding purposes. The reason why I do not like this is take like a space station last year, right? Spring NA1. They would have got the NA5 seed immediately because they didn't have points at the other majors or in winter major or whatever. But like, it's just odd because you're going to play through a split and you're like, all right, they're fighting for the North American 1 seed in Major 2, but they're actually not because those will already be set. Say like a Gen G wins Major 1, right? If Gen G even squeaks in as the 4 seed of NA in Split 2, they automatically get the NA1 seed. And I think you could possibly say like, oh, that might be a little bit fair or not or whatever. But like, say like an NA4, right? An NA4 in Major 1 gets last place. We'll say they lose to SSA and APAC, right? They get NA4 again going into Major 2. Some other team, a brand new team formed. They're looking fantastic. They get the NA1 in Split 2, right? but it's a brand new team, so they don't have any major points, or they just barely missed out. Maybe they missed out. They were in like 5th place, right? And then they just really figure it all out, and now they're the NA1 seed of Split 2. Well, they're going to come in as a lower seed than that NA4, who got NA4 both splits, who also came in last at the first major. And I don't think that's fair. I think it should just be like, just take these same seeds, like, or even base it on, all right, Major 1, again, based on where the regions place, that'll be your default seeding. But then if you come in NA1 and Split 2, then you get that seed. Basically what they did was they completely abolished, and this is a much longer video than I expected. I apologize. I rant about formats a lot. Thank you if you're still here. But my biggest issue with all these format changes, but for the most part, like, I don't mind them, like, outside of qualifiers, is that there is no like world region leaderboard at all, right? That's completely gone. Because as you go through Major 2, you go into the World Championship, it's the same exact 4 seeds. All right? So none of that even matters. Or the exact same seed. So even if Europe dominates, if NA is terrible, it doesn't matter. Like, NA will take 4 teams. Europe will take 4 teams. Losing that world region leaderboard is really, really hurtful. Now, I get why it's not there, right? Because we're obviously no wild card in the World Championship anymore. So why would you change who's there? But just the whole, like, world region leaderboard, it doesn't even matter in, like, Major 2 of, like, impact who's seated where. Like, I guess it kind of does because of RLCS points earned at Major 1, but at the same time, it's not, because if Europe's very competitive and they send 3 brand new teams into Major 2, and in Major 1, Europe was the top 4 teams in the event, well, those 3 European seeds are going to be dead last. That they're going to be seeds 14, 15, and 16, which makes absolutely no sense. That's if, like, say, every single team is the same. So, like, in a competitive region that brings new teams to Major 2, they're just going to be seeded dead last. Like, even, so here's a better way of putting it. And again, I'm sorry that I am ranted. But, like, SSA 1, like, if it's the same exact team again, like, or APAC 1, if it's the same team from Major 1 to Major 2, they are going to move up a ton of places. Even if they come in last and go 0-9, they are going to move up a ton of places based on any new teams that are in Major 2. Any new teams will automatically be seated below them. Now, again, it's not as big of a deal because we're doing Swiss, thankfully. But this could have been a much bigger problem if we were doing brackets. So I'm not a huge fan of that change at all. Or actually, I hate it, like I should say. But yeah, so that is how that one works. World Championship is the exact same thing. Swiss, we're doing Major 1 and Major 2 points and all that stuff. So, like, I get that. But again, this is where it gets weird. If you have a team that's regionally fantastic, their points really don't matter, except for making it to the top 4. But then, like, if they did poorly at majors, they're going to be seated lower than their counterparts in their same region. And maybe that works. I'm not really sure. I personally don't like it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Besides that, that's basically it. Sorry for a long video. I'm trying to cut these down. I really am. But when I'm talking about formats, I'm going to go. I'm just going to go. So, to have a quick summary, every team plays in every single qualifier. It is double elimination brackets the entire way through. Every single event, including majors and worlds and qualifiers, is Swiss. Well, so I shouldn't say qualifiers, but regionals, because we use qualifiers twice. Swiss into top 8 for every single event. Top 8 is just a normal 1 life bracket. But yeah, seeding is done based on a mathematical point system, which I love, and that's pretty much it. So thank you guys for watching. Sorry, this was a very long video. Formats, I'm going to be here all day. But thank you for being here until the very end, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.